Sometimes it's not the house that's haunted, it's the land, and sometimes it's you. At Paranormal M, we explore the spaces where fear lives. Subscribe, and don't go in alone. The first paranormal experience I ever had, at 4 years old. First off, yeah, I was 4 years old. And no, I wasn't influenced by horror movies. My parents don't watch that shit. No shade intended to anybody who enjoys horror. And they damn sure wouldn't have let me see anything that I couldn't have planted an image like this in my brain at that age. Also, side note, it's not weird for me to have vivid memories from early childhood. I can remember things from as young as a year and a half old. Don't come for me. So here's my setup. My bedroom was at the top of the stairs in my parents' house, right across the hall from their room. There's a little landing with a linen closet at the top of the stairs, and those stairs led straight down to the back door. And that door opened up onto the porch, and it was the main entrance everybody used. That was because both sets of my grandparents and some of my cousins lived either next door or across the street. People were always coming and going. Anyways, I must have been put down for a nap. It was late afternoon, and I remember waking up to the sound of the back door opening. Curious, I got out of bed and walked to the top of the stairs to see who was coming in. And that's when shit got horrifying. There was a man. He was standing just inside the open back door. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, and wearing old overalls and a broad-brimmed hat. Looked kind of like a farmer, except he was pretty much covered head to toe in dirt and like he just crawled out of a grave. No exaggeration. As I stood there frozen at the top of the stairs, unable to move or even think, the man slowly lifted his head to look up at me. His face was a skull. Not like a Halloween mask, an actual skull, and the eye sockets were full of maggots. Some kind of primal instinct kicked in, and I screamed in the name of God to get out of this house. And by some miracle, it worked, and he vanished, the door slammed shut. But I noticed something. He left behind dirt on the floor where he'd been standing. Something deep in the back of my mind told me, you have to sweep that dirt out, or he won't really be gone. So I ran downstairs, grabbed the broom from the utility closet under the stairs. I swept the dirt outside. As soon as it was gone, I slammed the door shut behind me. I still don't know where my parents were during all of this. Maybe out on the front porch or picking blueberries from the bushes out back. All I know is I was alone when it happened, and I knew exactly what to do without anyone telling me. For me, that was one hell of a first experience with the paranormal. Has anyone else experienced something similar, especially if you're in coastal Alabama or in the Florida Panhandle? Or maybe just the South in general, in the USA? I ask because A, I don't want to feel alone, and B, I wonder if others may have experienced the same spirit or entity or whatever it was. I'm sharing a room with a ghost. I'm a travel nurse working in Germany. I just came last week to a new contract in a retirement home that recently opened. I was given a room of a resident that passed away. I have no problems with that. Death is just a continuation of life. But my first night here, I heard breathing next to me. I brushed it off as maybe half-open window that I closed shortly after. But the breathing continued for some time before it stopped. Today, as I was getting ready for a shift, I sat down into the living room. I'm here alone. I have the master key, and the key from the other residents won't work on my door. I'm inside of my room the entire morning before this happened. There's no way I could have brought this with me. Yet I was at the table for 10 minutes drinking coffee when I got up to brush my teeth. As I came back to the room, on the table where I was sitting, there was a green medication cup that I swear to everything I hold sacred wasn't there 2 minutes earlier. It was empty and just there, like somebody just put it down after taking their pills. I was telling this to my coworker, and she interrupted me before I could even finish and asked, "Is it the cup, like the green cup?" I showed her the photo that I took, and she said that the resident that died there only had medication in the green cup. Morning is yellow cup, midday is blue cup, evening is green cup, and night is red cup. His name was Klaus. He died 2 months ago from cancer at the age of 89. His wife lived next door to me, and she's 87. They moved in together 2 years ago, but after Klaus passed, she moved to a smaller room. The table walked across the room. Anyhow, today I'm sitting outside with my grandparents, my mother and my sister. And we are a Catholic family, or at least my grandma is very religious. We were discussing old family stories, and my grandma started telling me stories about what the older generation used to talk about sitting together in a little alleyway in her village. She told me stories I already knew, like about Trud, a spirit of some kind that would press on your chest when you were sleeping, waking you up and paralyzing you and stopping you from breathing. The first time I heard this, I was very surprised. I thought religious people back then would see this as witchcraft or evil things or whatever. But I guess I was wrong. Anyhow, my sister and I swiftly agreed that Trud was just a spiritual explanation for sleep paralysis. Then she told me a story about how somebody dreamed about Trud biting them in the finger, telling her to get salt. Terrified, she bought salt the next day, and in the evening, an old lady knocked on her door asking for salt, with a bandage around the same finger she got bitten in her dream. Again, getting off track, there is also a story about a lady who got rid of warts with crosses and burning the string under a water pipe. Alrighty then. But here's the thing. After those stories, my mother smiled and told my grandma, "Tell them about Aunt Maus." And my grandpa started laughing, and my grandma, in her old-fashioned dramatic way, covered her face and laughed nervously. "Oh, God, Jesus." I was immediately interested, like, what? My mother perked up and she looked at me and told me she could never forget it. She laughed at her mother's twisted face. She must have been around 10 or something when it happened. This specific story occurred in the 80s. My grandma started. Aunt Maus was a medium. I was damn shocked that we had a medium in the family. Like, beyond shocked. I never knew about Aunt Maus. She was an old lady already as the story took place, and she died maybe 2 or 3 years later in the mid-80s. They were at her house. My grandma, mother, grandfather, and some other relatives. Aunt Maus got a table. A small, round wooden one with no nails. I was told that that was very important. It could only be limed. I don't know why, but my mom didn't participate. She was just present, and they placed their hands on the table gently, all 5 fingers. Not pressing, just touching lightly, making contact with the hand next to them to form a circle. My grandma and grandpa showed me. My grandpa had to laugh because my grandma's hands were shaking, even 40 years later. Then Aunt Mouse started talking. I guess something about 2 thumps being yes and 3 being a no, or something like that. She started talking and asking questions. My grandma told me she had never felt anything like it, because the table started vibrating as apparently the first spirit showed up. With the next question, the table really thumped. My grandmother was terrified, and again, no foot under the table, no hands. The spirit was the father of my grandpa who had passed. She'd talked to him, and at one point she said something along the lines of, "You'd love to dance, I know, the waltz. Would you like to dance?" My grandfather, grandma, and mom, not gullible, well, maybe grandma, not believing in spirits, told the same thing with complete honesty in their eyes. The damn table started to dance. It tipped side to side, walking around, or, well, danced around the room. I looked at my mother and she had a glow in her eyes. Childlike wonder, I guess. "Really?" My mom nodded, even in disbelief now. "I think I screamed," she laughed. Aunt Mouse then asked again, "You always wanted a daughter, a little girl, though you never had the chance to see her. Do you know she's here?" "Where is she?" My grandpa told that part of the story with real thought behind his eyes. The table walked over to the stairs where little Marie was sleeping in her room. It's like he couldn't believe it. "Yeah," my grandmother agreed. I have never, ever heard of a spirit being contacted this way, like never. And this story is insane to me. Why no nails, and why do you mean my own family saw something like this? We had a medium, and I have, thank God, never experienced something paranormal. I would shit my pants. But they would never lie about something like that. Apparently, Aunt Mouse also did this during the Second World War, where there was always like a friendly spirit of a submarine captain. I'm offended I've only been told this story now. And now that I think of it, every spiritual experience that has been told to me has come from my grandfather's side. When his uncle died, he and his mother heard an immense loud knock in the night. Apparently, at the exact time he passed away, the medium, also grandfather's side, and my mother was sleeping in the bed of her grandmother, my grandpa's mother, feeling guilty that she hadn't seen her the day before she passed when she felt a tap on her back to move over and something laying down beside her. They had a close bond. So, am I going insane? Like, I know they wouldn't lie, and I am beyond certain. I mean, a Ouija board, I get how you could fake that, but table walking? I'm questioning everything. Heard chants like whispering when somebody ran at me with a machete. Back in the 21st December, or on the 21st of December in 2019, I was cycling to work in the early hours of the morning, 0400 hours, due to a storm in the area. I had to come off the main road and go underneath an underpass. I've come down the small back road with houses running parallel, and when I entered that road, I heard whispering and chanting. Got to the opening of the underpass, and just as I entered what I describe as a man, large build, dark trench coat, stepped out. A crowbar type of tool in his left hand and a big blade in his right. He locked eyes and began walking fast before breaking out into a run. Before he stepped more than 10 meters, I turned that bike around and cycled as fast as I could back out into the main road. And now what I've always put down to is me having a hallucination, but maybe due to the early hours of the morning. Never had this type of thing and had been cycling to work for 3+ years at this point. Now, it is also being near Christmas, and I also thought that it was a prank or YouTube video. Speaker set up somewhere along the road, and then some clown playing a prank. This incident was logged with local police less than 5 minutes after. Within 15 minutes, they was there. This chanting was not my native language. It felt like it was warning me. My puppy Memorial flew off the counter at me this morning. Not really sure which tag to use, first of all. So, my puppy passed away a few years ago due to an awful disease. Tried so hard to help her, but sadly she passed away. After she passed, I took her footprint with some ink and put the paw print into a jar of glass, and I've had that jar sitting in my dresser for some time now. This morning, the jar flew off, hit me in the back of my head. There was absolutely no way it could have fallen. This isn't the only thing that's happened. I constantly see animal and shadow-like beings, almost like a human walking like a dog in my kitchen, but they disappear rather quickly when I try to get a good look. The dog I have currently will start barking in the living room at night, and the only thing different about the paw print was last night I sat it on top of a photo of an angel that was where it was sitting when it flew off at me. Something similar happened a few years ago when a popcorn tub came flying at me. I've also seen things in this house quite often. Most of the time, it's a shadow figure with a very specific, almost cone-shaped, head of hair. 3 cones, one on top, one on each side. And oftentimes, I wake up feeling like I'm being watched, and sometimes I see this figure. It gives me a deep sense of fear and dread. Has anybody had experiences like this? And do they know what it could be? Possible cat spirit in my home. Feeling uneasy. Looking for guidance. Over the past few nights, I felt what seems like a small animal, like a cat, walking over my bed. It even feels like it sometimes lies down on me, but I don't own a cat. One night I opened my eyes and I saw a small dark cloud floating above me. There were swirling patterns inside of it. It wasn't just a dream, it felt real. The energy wasn't just aggressive, but it really wasn't peaceful either. Just strange and a little uninvited. To make things more complicated, there has been a death in this house in the past. I recently found out there's a cat grave nearby. Starting to wonder if these things are connected. I've already done a cleansing ritual with white sage, and the smell still lingers in my clothes and home, but I'm not sure the energy's actually cleared. Has anyone here experienced something like this, a ghost cat or a spirit presence? Could it be tied to the past energy in the house or that nearby grave? And most of all, what can I do to feel calm and feel safe again? It's been 15 years. I still see figures and struggle to fall asleep. Ever since I was young, I would see figures and shadows and ghosts and quote-unquote demons. I know it sounds weird or made up, but I think it's important to note that I lived in a haunted house for 9 years, from age 5 to 14, and had my first paranormal experience around 8, or at least that I can remember. Also, I never knew it was a haunted house until recently, while talking to my parents. But apparently, all of our next-door neighbors knew it was haunted. But basically, regardless of whether my eyes are closed or I'm half asleep or fully energized, or if it's midday or midnight, I keep seeing visions of faces and creepy monsters looking like they're trying to, pounce me or get ready to attack me. Even in my dreams, there's always paranormal activity at some point in time. There is a specific person or entity that keeps haunting me. And I don't know who they are, and I refuse to research who they are because I'm genuinely scared. The closest entities I can describe that look like it is, well, without looking up images, is La Llorona and the nun from The Conjuring. Another important note is that I had seen that entity without ever watching those movies, and prior to knowing it even existed. I first saw this entity when I was 8 or 10 years old, and in my dream, and, well, when I was 10 years old in my dream, and in the dream. I was in one of the rooms in the haunted house, and it was cornered in a corner and started levitating while staring at me. The next thing I know, we switched places, and it stood where I stood, where I'm levitating where it levitated. My dreams are realistically haunting and graphic. Has lots of gore, etc. The only thing that keeps me safe or makes me feel safe is singing hymns in my dreams, but it's getting harder and harder. I tried talking to my parents, but they're no help, and I've been researching for any sleep experts or anyone in my area who can help me. They only offer medicine and such, and I've tried meds before for similar reasons, but it's only made things worse. And I'm at my wit's end. I've already tried a lot of things. Oh, and I also live 3 houses away from a haunted house, but I'm also very deeply traumatized and have depression, if that's important in any way. Haunted house lore used to be it used to be a morgue or a funeral home for the cemetery up the road in the 1800s or early 1900s. That was until it was renovated into a rental home. And the room we slept in, where they prepared the bodies, and a lady also supposedly killed herself just outside of her room many years ago. I couldn't find any official documents or information on the house on Google, but many neighbors who have never talked to each other have said the same things about seeing figures and watching them, even when they knew there was no one home, and even described them to have afros and be very tall. There are some tall members of my family, but absolutely none of them or anyone we have invited have an afro or match their description. And there were 11 of us living in the house, excluding the neighbors. And it was very big with a weird layout. The garage was the size of 2 classrooms. The garage was also filled to the brim with junk. When we cleaned it out, we found a bunch of toilet seats. Very old tools we've never seen before, like 1890s. Some random bed frames and chairs and cabinets with medical compartments. The backyard was arguably the area that scared me the most. Whenever I was in the kitchen at night, where we could see clearly into the backyard, I swear there was a woman in white watching me. Could never shake the feeling even when I got older. We also had downstairs neighbors, and they had a tiny section of the house themselves. They would last no longer than 2 years because they kept hearing whispers, and their doors kept slamming. And we've had 4 or 5 neighbors move in and then move out constantly. I think it was due to the same thing. They initially assumed the whispers were us because it was in Fijian, and we're not Fijian. Until they heard our language and realized there was literally no one else who spoke that language in the neighborhood. Our old landlord also confirmed with one of my aunts that the house was indeed haunted when he moved out. What the fuck would you tell us that at the end, bro? We were also the longest ever tenants in the house. Other people have lasted 1 year at most, confirmed by neighbors and the landlord. House is now fully renovated though, so best of luck to whoever you are. Weird reoccurring experiences at my friend's house. Every day for the past 4 days, my friend has started experiencing some unusual things at around 0000, or 12 a.m. as us Americans say. On the first day, she heard strange growling noises from her gate. When she checked, she didn't see anything there, and on day 2 she went downstairs and tried to open her kitchen door. But she was struggling to open it because it felt like something was physically pushing back on it. She went back upstairs, and in 5 minutes she heard a loud bang downstairs. She went to check it out while on FaceTime with her boyfriend. She tried to open the door, but it somehow jammed, and when she flipped the camera to show her boyfriend that she couldn't open the door, it suddenly unjammed. I don't know if this is related, but she was on mute the whole time until she flipped her camera around, but doesn't remember ever putting herself on mute. It might have just been an accident. On day 3, she had another friend sleep over, and when they were heading downstairs to investigate, they both heard a dragging noise near the stairs but couldn't identify it. They got bored and decided to download a Ouija board iPad game just for jokes, but then got pretty freaked out and stopped paying attention for a second, and suddenly the iPad switched apps and refreshed itself so they couldn't say goodbye. But we're not really looking into that much, since it was just a silly iPad game. Maybe it was a bad idea, but unfortunately we can't and do not know how to undo it. Today, on the 4th night, my friend's TV randomly turned off. It's not like she wasn't using it for a while. She used the remote 5 minutes before, so it could have turned off automatically. She went downstairs for a bit again since she was starting to get even more suspicious. And before she reached for the handle, it made a creaking noise. She got freaked out and called me, and the other friend that after a few minutes we all heard a short howling noise from the phone. It was highly unlikely that it came from their surroundings, since they both claimed they heard it come directly from the phone, and they live in a pretty urban area, so most likely it wasn't some wild animal. But I'm not sure. I thought maybe it came from me, since I'm staying at a more rural area with forests nearby. But I asked my entire family, like 5 of them, if they heard anything. They all said no, and I'm also pretty certain I heard it come from the phone, so we're all pretty lost. I have to emphasize again that this all happened very close to 12 a.m. each night. So could we get some advice on what to do? Like, how could we be certain that this is paranormal? We never experienced anything like this before. Maybe we're just being a bit dramatic, but even my old-fashioned and non-believing family all thought this was weird, so thank you for listening. Also, her dog started barking like mad at one point, for seemingly no reason. And one of her cats stared off at the door and wasn't responding when called out for. She also gets wafts of some bad smells from time to time. Not sure what days this happened on, but it's worth noting. So day 5, the dog was barking like crazy today, wanting to get out and scratching on the door. So my friend let him out, and he kept on looking and walking up at the gate, and when my friend checked it out, there was nothing there again. Later, her 2 cats arrived, and all the animals started going frantic, wanting to be let in. Also, am I going crazy? When she was on FaceTime, I was looking really closely at her surroundings, particularly at her window, and I sort of saw a face. But it was super pixelated, so I might just be seeing things out of fear. But I did see it the whole time, slightly moving. And this might be a total reach though, and I have a picture, but I'm not really sure how to upload it. Well, Any more help would be appreciated. In day 6, in case anybody was wondering, her bathroom door slammed shut randomly, and it wasn't a draft. It's been a while since I updated, since she started going to bed early and using earplugs, so she hasn't been looking out for paranormal activity. It got too freaky, but if anybody else can share any more advice or insight, it would help a ton. Another update. Okay, day 7. My friend's cover of the fan fell off as she was picking it up, and the fan fell on her, nearly sliced her finger off. Her dog was also barking again, but she didn't go down and check it out since she didn't want to really think too much into it anymore. And this is still happening at 12 every night. Something behind me. During the start of COVID-19, we were practically caged into our homes, and my friends and I found asylum from the boredom and loneliness by playing online games. We'd play from afternoon to sunrise on most days. And during this time, I lived with my mother in a small studio apartment, just a gaming laptop, a small table, and a bed behind me. Every night while I play games with the boys, I always tend to look behind me. I keep feeling how I thought somebody was calling me, like my mother, constantly throughout the night. And every night I tend to look back as I keep hearing somebody call on to me. And sometimes I'd look back because it feels like someone was behind me. And maybe I would have woken up my mother from all the noise while playing. Sometimes I'd look into the direction of the comfort room. That's where we keep the door a little bit open, as if something could be there. It was always a constant feeling, and I'd have to endure every night. I wanted to discuss this with my mother, but our family's pretty religious. My mother, like my grandparents, they're the type to dismiss such stories and experiences as nothing but mere, imagination or lack of faith. A few months later, when it was a little bit more relaxing during the pandemic, my mother and I moved to a bigger apartment. Casually during dinner, I brought up the experiences I've been having in our last apartment. Honestly, expecting the usual answers, I was pretty shocked when my mother added on to my story instead. She said at times she'd be woken up by, my noise at night, but would endure it. She was scared to confront me because she feels like there's something behind me all the time during those times, as if a dark, tall shadow was behind me. She didn't just see this once or twice, but for the whole 6 months of lockdown. After that, I never stayed up late gaming with the lights off again. I think my dad may have attended my brother's graduation, and some other interesting tidbits. First off, I'd like to say that I consider myself a skeptic. I enjoy reading the writings of men like Isaac Asimov and Carl Sagan, Christopher Hitchens, and so on. I'm not convinced that what happens was something unexplainable or somehow unnatural, but it was interesting. You see, my dad had been going through an illness. Well, actually, multiples of them, and for some years after I'd graduated high school. My brother had gone off to join the Marines, and for a while it was just him and me. We were inseparable. And there was my mom as well, but she and him were estranged from each other. An important thing to remember here is that Dad loved coffee, and he and I would drink it whenever we were out and about, and he would drink it with his older friends too, who he would meet with on the weekends. When Keurig machines came out, he would drink many pods worth of coffee. But anyways, my family is a military family on my dad's side, and he was overjoyed to see my brother join the Marines, and very happy when he returned. But unfortunately, Dad died less than a year after my brother came home, meaning he didn't get to see him get married or graduate from university, and that fact bothered my brother. The interesting part is this. On the way to my brother's graduation ceremony, My mother and I noted at the same time that the car was saturated with the smell of coffee, specifically the smell of Starbucks coffee, my old dad's favorite. We weren't in the university town yet, which my brother offered as an explanation as there's many coffee shops there. But the windows were closed and we were in a residential area. I don't know how to explain it. I'd like to think that Dad got to see my brother graduate after all. And this was his way of saying, hey, I'm still here for you. As to the tidbits I mentioned, I've also had times when an intense smell of perfume permeated my room. Not from a brand I recognized, but definitely perfume. And at times, when I was alone in that part of the house. Then there was the time my cat passed away, and a couple of nights, not around the time that she passed, mind you, that I would feel the movement of little feet and the familiar weight of a small animal settle down between my legs. But of course, nothing was there when I turned on the lights. Finally, there were a couple of times that the lights in my room would turn on by themselves, sometime past midnight, and I thought it might be a power surge, but there was no other electronics being affected. How is the baby? I've lived in the same small, rundown trailer park since birth, essentially. It was rampant with drugs and shady characters. The most popular drink and drug of choice at the time were heroin and beer. When I was 8, my mom married a man named Paul. Paul had been in a pretty bad car accident shortly before meeting my mom and was prescribed oxycodone for the pain. He quickly got hooked, so soon after the authorities began cracking down on overprescriptions for opioids, and Paul was no longer able to legally get his fix. He turned to the streets, and at $30 a pill, he had to find something else. Eventually just graduated to injecting heroin. Is that cheaper? Anyway, Paul had a friend named Luke, whom he met when he first started using heroin. Luke was a seasoned drug user and a drunk. Luke and Paul got along well. And since I grew up in this trailer park, Luke had been around just as long as I had. He knew me when I was a child, and he knew me as a teen. I'd pass by Luke often, especially when I went to check the mail. He'd be walking the opposite way, heading to a neighbor's house, and would always say, "Hey, sweetie." Luke could be drunk as a skunk and barely able to walk from being high, so he'd always straighten himself up just enough to slur out a "Hey, sweetie" when he saw me. Luke was around when I had my first child, a daughter at 16. I was still in high school, and "Hey, sweetie" eventually turned into "How's the baby?" Every time I saw him, whether or not I had my daughter with me. About a year after having my daughter, I went to school, and when I came home from the bus stop, I saw tons of police near our trailer. I was still a few yards away, so I kept approaching, trying to see what was going on. There was caution tape around the house, and the back door was hanging open. And as a teenager, I brazenly started up the 3 steps that led into the trailer. But a deputy stopped me, told me I couldn't go inside. "What do you mean I can't go inside? I live here," I said. The deputy responded, "I can't let you in, it's a crime scene." When Paul appeared, much to my dismay, and by this time Paul was a full-blown addict who had broken my mom down mentally, emotionally, and financially. And if Paul was here, my mom was at work as a preschool teacher, and my daughter was at that same school, so what was going on? Paul explained that around 10 a.m., Luke had come over to hang out. Paul was sitting in the recliner strumming his guitar, while Luke stood in the kitchen. The kitchen had a countertop that separated the living room from the kitchen, so Luke was out of Paul's direct line of sight. Paul said that Luke came over extremely intoxicated with a beer in hand. And after a few moments, Luke fell down, and Paul assumed that he had just passed out drunk. Luke was lying there for 2 to 3 hours, and Paul continued strumming his guitar, even singing a song about Buddy Luke passing out and puking. It wasn't until Paul had to use the restroom that he noticed Luke wasn't just passed out, he was blue. Paul immediately called 911. They instructed him to perform CPR, which he did, and he described it as the single most foul thing he'd ever attempted to do. Luke had died and vomited, and every time Paul tried mouth-to-mouth, vomit would come out. And after a while, Paul couldn't continue and just waited for emergency personnel. The call to 911 was made at 1:12 p.m. By the time I got home around 3:45, the body had been removed, but the scene was still treated as suspicious. Because of that, nobody was allowed inside. Eventually, the police let Paul back in, but it wasn't until after 6:30 p.m. that my mom came home. She was very angry, and my daughter and I were just waiting to go inside. Paul said he'd go in and clean up whatever mess was left behind. According to him, there's a lot to clean up, and about an hour later, he said that we could come in. The kitchen floor was so sticky you could hear your feet stick to the linoleum when you walked across it. Heroin addicts aren't exactly the best maids, so we lived in that trailer for at least another year, but I never walked across that floor barefoot, nor did I let my child walk across it either. No matter how much we cleaned, it would always feel sticky. About 6 months after Luke passed away in our kitchen, I was standing outside, leaning on the bed of the truck and talking to a friend. The trailer I was standing outside of happened to be the one Luke had lived in for many years before moving to a different one, where he was living at the time of his death. My friend now lived in that same trailer. We were just hanging out and talking when I heard a very clear, very familiar voice. "How's the baby?" Fate of Paul. Paul later confessed to me that when Luke passed away, he had taken Luke's used syringe out of his sock and used it to inject himself later that night. After leaving the trailer, we lived in a small rented house for about a year before my mom left Paul. Paul went back to the trailer park, dragged the mattress him and my mom shared into the overgrown, now wooded area of a destroyed playground. It's a playground that belongs to the church next door. He had a large tent, and that's where he lived, and he lived for 6 months after my mom left him. He shot up in his tent and nodded out with a lit cigarette, like I'd seen him so many times. Usually it was just wind up burning his leg and he'd wake up, but this time it caught the mattress on fire. He asphyxiated due to an overdose of heroin laced with fentanyl, and burned, only being found 3 days later by a friend who couldn't see the top of his tent anymore, as he put it. He was identified by dental records. Yucky. Batty blocking hag. Around 9 months ago, I'd just gone through a terrible breakup. It was my first major relationship and it lasted 2 years, so I was not really in a great place mentally, and she had dumped me and I tried to fill that hole inside me with another person. Getting to the point, I was hooking up with this girl I'd recently met. Let's call her Anna. I had gone over to her house and we were making out in her bed, and it was about 11 p.m. The room's light was off and the only illumination was from her bedside digital clock, which did light up the room, just enough to see the blurry gray outline of objects in her room. I was locked in the moment and I was on top of her when I feel this weird nagging sensation like we were being watched. I ignore it and I know that the room is locked and the only person inside of it is us. But as we continue, I couldn't shake that feeling. Deciding to put my mind at ease, I glanced up to give a quick survey of the room. I don't know what I expected to see, but to my left, about a foot away, standing at the edge of the bed, staring intently, is this figure, which in my quick absent-minded glance in this dark room caught me totally off guard. And from what I made out, looked like an old hunched hag, probably between the ages of 70 and 80, standing at the side of the bed, and she had dark, oily, stringy, hanging hair, dirty, grimy skin with a huge smile stretched onto her face, and inhumanly long, twisted, spindly fingers. They were clutching the edge of the bed. I pull away from Anna, startled and thinking, holy shit, what the fuck is that? She's looking up at me, wondering what's wrong, and I look around the room once more, and the old lady is gone. Anna's asking me, like, if everything's all right, and steel myself and decide it must have been a trick of the light, telling her that it's all fine. The night goes on, and at some point a little later, Anna gets up and tries to turn the light on. The light turns on for a second, then flickers a bit before blowing, plunging the room into darkness. Now, I'm not a small guy. I'm 6'1" and 210, but the weird occurrences were starting to get to me a little bit. Especially when I hear Anna muttered, "That's weird, I literally just replaced those lights." It was getting late, so I slept over without incident, left the next morning. Now, all of this had left my head in the day, and I'd shaken off any of the residual fear left from the night before, falling asleep in my own bed without a problem, until I wake up in the middle of the night. Same sensation. Something's watching me. I try and move and realize my body is paralyzed, and I'm freaking out thinking, holy shit, is this sleep paralysis? Trying to figure out why I'd woken up at 2 a.m. undisturbed. I'd fallen asleep on my back, so I was positioned staring at the ceiling. I couldn't turn my head to look. I could feel something on the side of my bed watching me. I've never felt fear like that in my adult life, and I can feel my heart beating and adrenaline surging through my body. I slowly inch my eyes toward the side of the bed, and my worst fears are confirmed. The same hag from Anna's house is standing less than a foot away from me. Her hands are outstretched, and her wide grinning mouth inches from my face. Her dark eyes are absorbing into my soul, although she is shrouded in darkness. And we stay like this, me frozen and her standing over me, smiling for hours, until light enters my room and I can move again. The next day I take this as a sign, and I decide that something is attached to Anna or her room and has followed me home, and it clearly does not want me near her. So I cut my losses, cut ties with Anna. And for context, I've never had sleep paralysis before, not once in my life. I haven't even had nightmares for years, and I haven't had a sleep paralysis experience since. My biggest drive behind this being a supernatural event is because of the timing and the place of the haunting. Mid makes out, I should not be subconsciously thinking about ghost grandmas watching me, especially when there's not been anything to trigger such a thought. I'd felt safe and happy in Anna's room before the incident. Second, her light bulb blowing was a cherry on the cake. Third is its strange timing for my first ever sleep paralysis experience to happen, especially with the demon manifesting as the same hag bitch that I'd seen the night before. Fourth, as soon as I cut ties, everything weird stopped. Have not seen the hag since. My time in the Caribbean. So this happened when I was around 8 to 10 years old, visiting my grandma's house in Trinidad. And it was me, my grandma, a couple of uncles, and my sister all staying there. The house already had a reputation. Everybody always talked about seeing or hearing ghosts there. But I just brushed it off as family superstition. Caribbean people always talking about spirits and duppies? And I thought it was just old folks being dramatic. But anyway, one night I'm sleeping in the guest room, one of my sisters, with my aunt, and I start hearing this soft crying voice like a young girl sobbing. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but it was definitely a child's voice, and younger than anyone in the house. I was the youngest, so it made no sense. It freaked me out immediately. Now, the guest room was right across from the stairs, and to get to my grandma's room, I had to run up the stairwell. So what do? I wrap myself up like a burrito in my blanket. I make a run for it. Not looking at anything, just my feet hitting the floor. I bust into my grandma's room, turn on the light, and slam the door, and she wakes up instantly, like she knew something was off. Before I could even say anything, we both hear the crying too. She just pulls me in and holds me, tells me it's okay and that she knows how to help her, the spirit. Caribbean grandmas are scary calm when it comes to this voodoo stuff, man. Then she gets up and I literally beg her not to leave, and I didn't care that the lights were on. I didn't want her to just be out there alone. But she closes the door behind her and goes anyway. I'm in bed, still wrapped in a blanket. Can't even look around the room. Every little creak makes me feel like I'm about to die. Then I hear her voice, my grandma. She says she's back and everything's okay, and I feel somebody sit on the edge of the bed. But there's no sound of the mattress creaking, which is a red flag. I ask her to put her hands on the mattress so I can see them before I come out, and she does. I slowly lift the blanket, check everything in her hands and arms and nightgown. All normal, till I get to her neck. Her skin is pitch black, like a natural shadow black, and I lose it. Blanket goes back over my head and I'm silently sobbing, full on snot faucet mode. Eventually, the weight on the bed lifts and now the mattress creaks. When my real grandma finally comes back, I hear the door open this time, green flag. She says, "Mama, I'm back." I still don't trust it fully, so I ask her to put her hands down too. She sits next to me, springs creak again, which is a green flag, and number 2, and pulls me in for a hug through the blanket, and I can feel it's really her. I rip the blanket off. She calms me down and tells me that she helped the little girl find the light. I tell her about the fake version of her that came back while she was gone, and she hugs me tighter. She tells me to feel her chest. Her soft skin and steady heartbeat honestly grounded me again. Then she picks me up, and Caribbean grandmas are strong. Tells me she needs to get some things from downstairs, and this time she's bringing me with her. I'm terrified, but I hold on to her tight, and her heartbeat keeps me calm. And here's the creepy part. She doesn't turn on a single light going down the stairs or back up. Could have, just didn't. And her heartbeat stayed completely steady, like she wasn't scared at all. Back in her room, she sits me down and starts placing all these spiritual items around, like stone statues and paper with writing and cups with sand or something. I keep begging her to close the door because I can't stop looking at the pitch black hallway, but she tells me, "Doors don't keep spirits out, your mind does," and says she'll be making sure nothing gets in. She tucks me in and turns off the lights. I panicked, but she kept her hand on my head, covering my eyes gently like she always does when she sings me to sleep. I eventually pass out. Next morning, I wake up to sunlight and voices in the house, and my uncles are talking low in the kitchen. I go out, and my grandma's just sitting at the table like always. I've been too scared to ask her what really happened that night. We don't talk about ghosts, unless she brings it up. But yeah, that's my Caribbean ghost story. The Oz effect experience. That silence feeling being watched. Yeah, I'd recommend you listen to it. Last summer I had this feeling, in the middle of the woods in a spot in the Caribou goldfields. Caribou, maybe. Where a triple murder and robbery took place in the 1860s. I was on the Old North Trail in an area called Murderer's Gulch, on a secondary road into an abandoned mine. This place is deep in grizzly bear country, in thick forest. It was a hot, sunny summer day. No people live within miles of this place. One can Google for the story of the murders and robbery. My girlfriend and I wanted to check the area out after hearing the story. The main roads washed out, so we took the Old North Trail. That's where the robbery took place over a century ago, which is now an old deactivated logging road down to the opposite side of the main road past the washout. That leads into the abandoned mine. The main road had been totally washed out at Murderer's Creek several years earlier. The secondary road we took was not great, which had small washouts and was very overgrown. We spent 2 days clearing and fixing the road, and on the second day, we decided to walk the rest of the road, to get a sense of whether it was worth continuing trying to fix said road to get down to the abandoned mine in my truck. But anyway, before we went down on foot, my girlfriend wandered down the road a bit and came running back as I was digging away past a small washout in the road. She asked me if I heard that sound, in quotes. I had not heard anything as I was shoveling, just filling the small washout to a point to get my truck further down said road. We walked down to the abandoned mine to see how much work was ahead of us. I had my .45-70 lever-action guide gun with me, since we were in bear country. It was a steep grade with a cliff down to the mine site, hundreds of feet below and thick forest on the other side of the road. Basically, it's a bottleneck the whole way down for about 1.5 miles. We got down, looked around the abandoned mine for about an hour, before heading back up the steep road to my truck, and on the way back I had an off vibe. I stopped before the V onto the bypass road that we came down. I felt something was off, like we were being watched. A big danger feeling where my hair stood up. My girlfriend asked if everything was okay, and I said, yeah, not wanting to freak her out. But I stood still listening, and I could tell she felt it too. And that's when I noticed it was silent. No sounds, no birds chirping, just silence. Then a squirrel lost its shit, chirping the danger sounds that they do. Then we heard 3 very loud knocks up the road back to the truck coming from the woods. Loud and spaced about a second apart between each knock. It was like somebody smashing a big rock on a tree not far behind the tree line. This being up the way that we had to go to get back to my truck. We kept walking toward it. There was no choice if we were to get out of there. It was hot and steep, and there was no way we could run due to the grade of the hill. Then we heard something. It was following us off to the left in the forest. Then 5 loud knocks 200 meters up the road from the last knocks. We were in the bottleneck, steep cliff to the mine on the right, close knocks to the forest on the left. I looked at my girlfriend and said, we have to get the fuck out of here. We pushed up the steep road, me keeping an eye on the forest, ready to shoot whatever it was that was following us. It was the scariest walk of my life, but we got to the truck and got out of there. The sound my girlfriend heard prior to heading down turned out to be the same knocking sound we heard in the walk back up. To this day, I truly believe I met and interacted with a ghost cat, cuddles, purrs, and all. This happened to me back when I was in high school. And for extra context, our home was built in the late 1860s. quite a few people have lived in that house before we moved in. But one night I got myself prepared to go to bed as usual, and before I do, I check that there's no cats in my room. I prefer sleeping with my bedroom door closed. I don't like to be woken up in the middle of the night by one of our cats wanting to get out. I have a hard time going back to sleep a second time. Once I had confirmation that all of our cats were, well, anywhere else but my room, that I kept shut the whole time as I checked and confirmed all cats were outside my room, I shut my door, turned off my lights, and went to bed. At the time, there was a little blue light from an electronic device that I had in my room. It would create some light in the room, bright enough to get an idea of your surroundings, but not bright enough to clearly see details or patterns on furniture and surfaces, nor bright enough to disrupt or prevent sleep. At some point, as I'm settled in, I feel and see a cat jump to my bed. I couldn't see which cat it was exactly, as the room was dark enough that the bed and the cat looked like black silhouettes. But from the cat's shape and size, I believe it was one of our older male cats. Though this cat looked a bit slimmer than our cats, looking back. I was already completely settled in bed to the point where I knew that if I got up again, my comfort state would be disrupted. So it'd be more annoying to get settled in the second time. So I figured what the hey and stayed in the bed as the cat came up to my face and arms and got all purry and cuddly. The cat was brushing his face against mine, purring and everything as I stroked him. At some point, as our cats tend to do, he started nuzzling his head into beneath my covers so he could sleep under them next to me. So I lift my covers enough for him to crawl in and get settled, which he does, but as he crawls in and settles next to my waist, I see the lump in the covers where his body is disappear, and I feel him literally vanish beside me, like a physical body just turning into air. And this confuses the heck out of me, because I know for a fact he didn't crawl out of the covers from the other end of the bed, as I would have felt him do so. And I would have heard him land his paws onto the ground as he got down. Plus, I was settled into bed myself. Yeah, but I was still wide awake when the cat came onto my bed and interacted with me. So I know I wasn't in any sort of a sleep state, where I could have hallucinated the cat. He was as real as any one of our cats. Sort of confusion and maybe curiosity, and a need for explanation, closure. I get up, turn on my bedroom lights. I search in and under the bed as well as everywhere else in the room where a cat could hide. Same places I looked before, turning off my lights for bed, and same as they were when I looked before, completely empty and cat-free. So I get out of my room, close the door behind me, and look to find where the other cats are. They're all settled in areas of the house except my room. To this day, I truly believe that I was visited by or interacted with a ghost cat who used to or still does reside in the house we live in. Whatever the real explanation behind this is, I haven't had an interaction like that again since. But it's an experience that fascinates me, if anything. I mean, imagine being visited by the ghost of a sweet former house pet who comes to purr and cuddle with you like any other house cat. My family's house is cursed. My grandpa used to say our family was once full of celebration and weddings and festivals. People coming from all over the place all the time. It was a happy place. Then one day when he was a kid, they found this creepy-ass doll on the rooftop. Some sort of voodoo or black magic thing. And ever since that day, nothing has ever been normal in our lives. Fast forward 2 years later, and my biological grandma burned herself alive in the house. Right there in what used to be the kitchen, now the dining room. Nobody talks about it much, but we all know that that was the start of something dark. Later, a baby was born in the family. The priest said the kid was born under some bad nakshatra, or planetary condition. He warned that somebody close, either the kid's uncle or father, might die unless rituals were performed. Well, we did those rituals. Still, not long after that, my uncle, my mom's brother, died, and he was young. Just married less than a year in his 30s. He was the only male offspring, and he was the child of my current grandma. And there's a total of 4 of them. The rest were the 3 that are the offspring of my deceased grandma, and they say that the deceased grandma killed herself. She didn't have a male child, which is pretty sad. They say she killed herself by burning herself with kerosene. And all of this was what I found in the attic, and overheard late-night conversations between the family. After that, it was like a curse exploded across the family. My grandparents separated after 40 years. The family renting the floor above us, well, 2 died and one of them hanged himself. My aunt, the kid's mom, tried to hang herself twice, and I personally stopped her both times. Even my dog dies randomly. I moved in there for a while for college and fell into deep depression, having the worst nightmares daily, and it took me more than 2 fucking years to get back on my feet. And that's not even the freakiest part. What I experienced as a kid. When I was young, I'd hear somebody whisper my name at night, like actually calling me, even when the house was dead silent. One time I woke up under the dining room table and no memory of how I got there. Guess where my grandma burned herself? Right there under the same spot. I got to know all of this when I found an old personal trunk of my grandpa that had photos of my real granny. Until that, I thought my step-grandma is my real granny, and I was flabbergasted, to be honest, and on God, I have experienced somebody whisper into my ear when I tried to sleep alone multiple times. Chills went from my ears to my toes. When I wake up like that, there's not a single person in the house, everybody was outside in the garden. It wasn't just me either. During their childbirths, years apart, both my mom and aunt saw the exact same terrifying thing, because I overheard their conversation. A woman with long black braided hair and sharp black nails lying next to them while they were frozen and couldn't move. They described it the same way, and both swear it wasn't a dream. They couldn't even scream. That one photo. There is a photo of my biological grandma in that house, and I swear to God you can't ignore it. Feels like she's staring right into you no matter where you walk. It's not even a creepy photo on purpose, just her face, but there's something wrong about it, and everybody avoids looking at it.
Prepare to be immersed in the realm of the unexplained. Paranormal M is where the ordinary ends and the extraordinary begins. Join us on this thrilling journey by subscribing and enabling notifications to ensure you never miss a spine-tingling moment. My uncle visited me the day of his death. I'll start by saying that my uncle, my mother's brother, had been quite ill for some time and was living in Guadalajara, Mexico. My family lives in Southern California, and I haven't seen him in 20 years since we couldn't afford to take the whole family to Mexico for regular visits, but we would speak here and there throughout the years. On Easter Sunday, my husband and I were putting up a new gate, and he and my son had made it the day before. I turned around to grab a tool and saw a tall, dark man with messy, curly hair walking toward me from the backyard. He came around me and then disappeared. Full disclosure, I see figures quite a bit, so this didn't really scare me. Yet, when my husband came back, I told him about the man and described him. He didn't recognize him, but we joked that it may have just been a nosy spirit wanting to see the quote-unquote construction happening at the house. Later that day, I took my kids to my brother's house where my mom is currently staying. She received a call from my aunt, her sister, My mom didn't want to answer right away. She wanted to play with the grandkids and said that she would call her later. After I got home, my brother called and said that my aunt had called to try to tell us that her uncle Rito died earlier that day. My mother was devastated, and after speaking with her and consoling her, I remembered my encounter with the dark figure. I searched through some old pictures. As I said, I had only a 20-year memory of my uncle, and I realized that that's who visited me. Except for one thing. My uncle was short, maybe 5'8", and this person was about 6 feet tall. But they both had curly, disheveled hair, had a bit of a potbelly, but still thin in the shoulders and legs. I haven't told my mother because I don't want to make her feel bad, but I think it may comfort her to know that my brother came by to say a final hello and a goodbye. Something used to harass me and my brothers in our beds. When I was growing up, whenever my brothers or I were too sick for school, we'd be expected to stay in bed and rest. No TV, no video games. And this was long before smartphones were a thing. My mother was a nurse and she would stay home and care for us. She would come into my room periodically and ask if I needed anything, and monitor my temperature. If I'd been sleeping, I would sometimes wake up to the sound of her opening the door. I would then hear her footsteps on the carpet as she crossed the room, and I would feel her sit down at the edge of the bed. After a moment, I would feel her place her warm hand on my forehead to check whether I might have fever. I would then either open my eyes and have a small chat, or sometimes just fall back to sleep without saying anything. The routine had been the same my whole life. One day when I was 13 or 14, I was homesick. I had been napping on and off throughout the day, and it was now mid-afternoon. My mom had come in to check on me 4 or 5 times. I was lying on my side with my eyes closed and I heard the door open. I heard footsteps walking across the room. I felt my mom sit on the edge of the bed, the soft mattress dipping dramatically beneath her, and the blankets pulling tight across my shoulder. I wanted to feel her hand on my forehead, but it never happened. I opened my eyes and turned out to look at her, only to see that there was no one there. I was confused. I shrugged it off and I went back to sleep. Fast forward a few weeks, and it was the middle of the night on a school night. I was roused from my sleep by the sound of my door opening. I heard footsteps walk across the room. I felt Mom sit on the edge of my bed, the mattress dip, and the blankets pulled tight. I wasn't sick at the time, and even if I had been, I don't recall Mom ever coming in to check in the middle of the night. I figured something must have been wrong, so I asked, "What's wrong?" No answer. I reached over and turned on my lamp. No one was there. I was confused again. So I shrugged it off, and I went back to sleep. Fast forward a few more weeks, and it was the morning and I was getting ready to leave for school. I used to ride my bike to school, but on that day, Mom insisted on driving me. It was just me and her in the car. As we neared the school, she pulled over to the side of the road and asked me if I'd noticed anything weird lately. I asked what she meant, and she kept it kind of vague and just anything weird. I told her about the couple of things that I could have sworn that my mom was coming into my room and sitting under my bed incidents. Not really sure if it was the sort of thing that she had in mind. She then told me that one of her brothers had been experiencing the same thing. After that, things got a bit more distressing. I would sometimes hear what sounded like footsteps walking on the roof in the middle of the night. And I would get that sense that something dark would loom over me at night. It would feel like all 4 corners of my mattress were being sat on at once. Or sometimes it would feel like something was lying beneath my bed and pushing up on the mattress from below. Going to bed became a source of great fear and anxiety. I'm sure some, if not most, of these experiences could have been in my mind, fueled by fear and adrenaline playing tricks on me. Sometimes I would hide under the covers, and sometimes I would hurl myself out of bed and flick out the light switch as I ran out of the room. These experiences persisted for months, and at the time my younger brother was reporting his own terrifying nighttime experiences. I'm sure that we were contributing to each other's fears, and the level of hysteria in the house was quite high at that time. The final part of this story happened one night when I was home and my older brother was hundreds of kilometers away at a school camp. I was woken from my sleep when I felt something in my hair. I first thought that it was a large spider or a cockroach crawling in my hair. I reached up with my hands and tried to catch it or brush it away, and the sensation came back. Something crawling through my hair deep down near the roots close to my scalp. I sat up in bed and with both hands ruffled through my hair until I was convinced that I had evicted all the unwanted creepy crawlies. I sat still for a moment and didn't notice any more movement, so I lay back down and tried to get back to sleep. Suddenly it felt like a hand grabbed my hair and gave it 2 or 3 violent tugs, then let it go. That terrified me. I pulled the blankets up over my head and kept them there for the rest of the night. In the morning, my older brother phoned us from his school camp. He was talking to Mom when he mentioned that he'd had a bad night's sleep and had resorted to wearing his beanie because it felt like something had been pulling his hair. I hadn't mentioned my hair pulling experience to anyone at that point. After that, my mom sought advice about what to do. Had someone come and cleanse the house, and would be regularly performing cleansing rituals herself, including smudging and reciting verses and leaving Bibles out around the house. Things improved soon after that, and the nighttime encounters practically stopped. A woman's voice tried to lure my brother and I toward it. This happened around 20 or 25 years ago. I don't remember the exact year. I must have been around 10 or 13 years old, and my older brother is 2 years older than me. When I was a kid, every year for Easter school holidays, my family would go out camping on some land that my grandparents owned. The best thing about it was having somewhere to legally ride our motorbikes. My older brother and I would often jump on our bikes and head off riding around the property together, racing and making up silly games. One year we were both out riding, but had gone our separate ways, so at this time I was on my own with no one else anywhere in sight. Suddenly I heard a voice say my name. I heard it clearly over the sound of the 2-stroke bike engine, and it didn't sound muffled through my helmet. It sounded more like it was being spoken directly into my ear, or as if I had a headphone or an earbud in my ear. At first I disregarded it. I thought maybe it was some strange interaction of the exhaust sound, the ear cavity of the helmet and the wind blowing across the helmet visor, basically some kind of auditory illusion. But I heard it again and again, a woman's voice calmly saying my name as if to get my attention. It would occur when I was riding in one small area and nowhere else. I'd say the area was a radius of 50 meters to 75 meters, and it was an area that we had to pass through to get to camp from the motorbike trails and back. The voice persisted for days in the same spot, and it increased its vocabulary. It would sometimes say my name, and it would sometimes say, "Come home." And it would sometimes say, "Come to me," with my name in there too. It started to creep me out, and I would feel anxious when approaching the area where it would happen. After a few days, and me not saying anything about it to anyone, I was out riding with my brother, and he signaled me to stop and pulled up right in the middle of the area I'd been hearing the voice. He turned his bike off and removed his helmet, so I did the same. We then had a short conversation where he asked if I'd been hearing anything weird, and if so, what? I told him I'd been hearing a voice. He went pale. I described the voice, and he said that it had matched what he was hearing. I asked what the voice was saying to him, and he told me that it would say his name and tell him to come to it. We rode back and forth and told her parents. Dad came out riding in the area with us. He didn't hear anything, and we didn't hear anything while he was there either. We kept hearing the voice over the next few days, always saying the same things. I remember this happening just 1 year, but I brought it up with my brother recently, and he seems to think that it also happened in the same place the following year. Scary man in the picture. 2 years ago, I took my wife, my father and son, then 3 years old, to visit family in rural New England, America. They live on a small farm with buildings that date back to the 1700s, which have been restored and modernized, and a guest house, which has been built about 20 years ago. My cousin is a prolific photographer, and my auntie had decorated most of the rooms for the main house and the guest house with her photos. We didn't notice much about the photos in the guest house when we first arrived, probably because we were all just jet-lagged. The next morning, after a sound night's sleep, we were sitting in the main family room eating breakfast and making plans for the day, when I noticed that my son was keeping his head down and not answering my father whenever he spoke to him, which was unusual because even at that young age they were very close. I looked over to my dad and noticed that he was sitting in front of a photo of a room in a rundown house. The room had a large window with sunlight streaming in, casting shadows across the length of the room toward a dark corner. I got an uneasy feeling from the photo, but didn't think much of it. We finished breakfast and we all got up from the table, and I noticed my son was walking in a wide arc around the end of the table where my father had been sitting. Again, weird behavior, but I just dismissed it as a weird 3-year-old thing. Over the next day or so, I noticed him becoming more and more uneasy any time that we were at the dining room table, and doing whatever we could to avoid looking at the photo. I decided to ask him what was wrong, and he answered me very matter-of-factly. The bad man in the picture is looking at me. He's very cold, and he's not nice. I looked back at the picture and got instant chills down my spine. There was no man in the picture, but I got the feeling that there was more to it than an empty room. I decided to ask my cousin about the picture. She told me that it was taken at an abandoned farm a bit further upstate. It was one of her favorite pictures, but had always given my aunt the creeps, so it was moved to the guest house. Over the next couple of days, whenever I'd ask my son about it, he would say things like, "The bad man is looking at me. He doesn't like me. He wants to hurt me." I didn't think much of it until we were going to bed one night and my son tripped and fell, seemingly for no reason in the middle of the hall, and started crying hysterically. When I asked him if he was okay, he said the bad man hurt me on the leg. I checked his leg, and sure enough, on the side of his leg there was a large bruise that looked like he'd been struck with a blunt object. I didn't want to play into his fears, but I asked him how the bad man could hurt him if he was in the photo downstairs near the table. His answer was enough for me to pack all of our shit and move to my main house, with my aunt, uncle, cousins, and a big burly housekeeper right away. He's not down there. He comes up here when we go to bed. We left soon after, so I never found anything out about the farm where the photo was taken, but I'm sure that there is some kind of evil presence around it. The heavy pillow. I remember being 15 years old. I never really believed in ghosts or anything, and I thought everything was just a wild coincidence. I was a skeptic, to say the least. One night, it was me, my girlfriend at the time, and a friend all in my room at night and early morning. My girlfriend always slept with the pillow between her feet. Don't know why, but that was just her. So this night, my buddy was on the top bunk while my girlfriend was on the lower one with me, and she felt something heavy on her legs right where the pillow was, and for some reason all of us were just kind of freaked out. My buddy comes down, and I go to the corner of my bed with my girlfriend. My buddy just goes to the other corner, grabs the pillow that was between her feet, and places it near the edge of the bed, and suddenly says, "If there's anything in this room, sit down on the pillow." Me being me at the time, didn't believe a damn thing and just kept my cool. It was basically saying everybody's acting ridiculous while simultaneously looking at the pillow. Literally a few seconds later, there's a butt print going down on the pillow in front of all three of us. And at that point, my body felt cold. I was too afraid to scream or do anything. My girlfriend was beyond scared, and my friend just began to cry. None of us knew what to do, and we ran out of my room to the outside yard and just spoke about what we saw to make sure that we weren't all going crazy. I'm 31 now, and I'll never forget that day. Although that was my first encounter, I've had plenty directly after. And just speaking about it gives me goosebumps and still scares me, makes me feel uneasy. I felt compelled to just let it out, hoping it'd give me a moment's peace. Two examples of my many weird experiences. As a kid, I would see things that might have been spirit guardians, angels or demons or ghosts, who knows. Random people or creatures seemed to visit me. Some only came at night, but plenty came during the day. I had a huge crush on a classmate of mine, this cute guy named Kevin. He wouldn't say much, but he'd wave at me sometimes and ask me to play with him. One night I dreamt that he was hit by a train and certain organs were missing. I went to school and wanted to tell him about it, but he didn't show up. In fact, I never saw him again, but when I asked him about him, neither my classmates nor my teacher knew who I was talking about. For the next thing, I'd like to add that I was born with some version of synesthesia, which causes me to see colors around every living thing. It allows me to kind of see emotions. Sounds weird, right? Well, it is. But what's weirder to me are the visuals that aren't linked to anything living. A guy I knew once took me to the park near his house. I'd never been there before, and I didn't know this guy very well yet. I told him about this stuff, and he asked me if I saw anything in the park. I pointed out 4 spots in the park. 2 were spots that were violent crimes, and they were taking place there. One was the spot where the emergency helicopter always lands, and the last was a spot on a low bridge. That's where he told me and his sister had fallen from the bridge and drowned. I heard a voice, but nobody was there. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago. Not too sure about the dates, but here's what happened. I went away for my parents' friend's birthday. We went to a place in Italy. I can't remember the location, but we all slept in this old cottage and the owner lived next door. Everything was okay for a day, and then weird things started happening. Like I'd go to sleep, I'd close the bathroom door, and then I'd wake up and it would be slightly open with the light on. It was just small stuff like that. Anyways, let's get to the day where it gets even weirder. So everything was going good this one particular day. Small things were happening in my bedroom, but I thought nothing of it. We went out for the day and came back, ate, then chilled. Fast forward to the night. I did what I did every night. I went to sleep. I closed the bathroom door and turned the light off and then fell asleep. Next thing I know, I wake up and I heard a little girl's voice saying, "Help me." I tried getting back to sleep, but I noticed that the bathroom door was open slightly and the light was on. I left it like that and I went back to sleep. I woke up again to the same voice saying, "Help me, please." She sounded young, like 7 years old, maybe 8. I stayed away as I couldn't get back to sleep and I was genuinely terrified. I managed to entertain myself when I heard the voice shout, "Bree," continuously. I tried getting back to sleep, but I couldn't. And this all continued to happen, and it was like 5 a.m. before I shouted for my dad. I told him everything that's happened, and he said nobody was in the room and nobody heard anything. Let me help you sort of picture how the room was laid out. The door was on the far left side of the room, and the bed was placed in the middle between the side table and the door. The bathroom door was on the right side of my room, and on the wall next to me, if that makes sense. Anyways, as the day went on, and I was more and more scared and didn't want to stay in the room, so later on that day, the owner of the cottage's grandson came to visit, and they had a swing outside in the front, so me and the boy decided to go swing and talk. I mentioned what happened, and he said that he stopped in the cottage once he heard his name being called, and the same situation happened to him. The rest of the time that we were at the cottage, I kept away from that room, and nothing more happened. I haven't been back since, and now I'd love to, as I'm fascinated with the paranormal. Also, just so nobody can say, it was probably someone playing a prank on me. It was confirmed by the owner that there's a little girl ghost in the room that I slept in, who says people's name, but also apparently she's completely harmless. The Man with a Soft Face. It first happened when I was 4 years old. I had a very strange dream where I saw a very tall, maybe 6'5" creature. Its skin was pinkish brown and it had bulging eyes, a red round nose and triangular teeth in its wide mouth. The creature was smiling, and its smile reminds me of what people now call uncanny valley. Both sadistic and happy. Also, even though I don't remember it in details, the creature seemingly had 4 fingers on each hand. In my dream, it tried to catch me, grabbing and carrying me somewhere. I attempted to fight it, trying to punch its face, but my fists got stuck in it, as if it was made of bubblegum. This is why I called it the Man with the Soft Face. But that dream was not the end. It became recurring, and I saw this creature in my dreams till I was 6. Sometimes it was just carried, or it would just carry me somewhere without saying anything, and sometimes it started choking me from behind. But the scariest part that made me fear this thing was its smile. Not even the feeling of total helplessness. Not that I had in these dreams, not as disgusting to the touch, the warmth and the sticky body in which my hands always got stuck. Its smile was the worst. Why did it always look so happy? Once when I had this dream, this creature was carrying me somewhere at night in the middle of the street. It was snowing and I could hear its feet stepping on the snow. I saw the street lights, the buildings, and the creature's face smiling as always. Strangely enough, its eyes never expressed anything. Total empty look. Carried me for a couple of minutes and then just stood somewhere. After a while, another creature approached. It looked similar to the Man with the Soft Face, except its nose was long, like that of Pinocchio. The Man with the Soft Face showed me to the creature, and they started to discuss something. I don't remember what they said. I don't even remember their voices, only the creature's lips moving as they were speaking. When I was 6, these dreams stopped, but I still remember them quite vividly, and they still feel scary. Has anyone else seen anything similar? I'd be glad to know if anyone else encountered this creature in their dreams. Paranormal experience in a friend's home. When I was about 17, I stayed at a friend's house overnight. We were up quite late, giggling and messing around in bed. You'd come into the house, and in the living room was on the left. Through a short corridor on the left was the stairs. Straight on through the corridor was a biggish room that mostly had lots of boxes and unused stuff, below my friend's bedroom, which then led to a small kitchen. Her dad's room was on the right when you came up the stairs. Her room was on the left and the bathroom along a landing leading from her bedroom, so it was directly on the left of her bedroom. The layout helped set the scene a little as quite late at night. Way after midnight, and we'd all gone to bed, her dad included. I started hearing noises downstairs. The noises seemed to start directly below us in an unused room. I whispered to my friend about it, who couldn't hear anything. At first, it sounded like a dull thud followed by a dragging noise, moving slowly through the room. My friend kept trying to whisper to me as normal, but all I could focus on was the noise getting gradually closer. As soon as I heard it reach the bottom of the stairs, I started panicking, whispering to my friend about it and feeling more freaked out when she still couldn't hear it. It felt like time slowed down as the same noise moved up the stairs. Thud, and a long scrape. I was crying a bit quietly at that point, hoping that if I pretended to be asleep, then nothing would happen. I remember feeling like I was aware of my presence, even at that point. My friend was silent too, and pretending to be asleep because she'd often be spooked by me. It finally got to the top of the stairs and went silent as it reached and stood outside her bedroom. I was holding my breath at this point and staring into the dark, hoping it would stop. It started moving again into the bathroom and then stopped as suddenly as it had started. After that, I felt instant relief, and like a pressure had been lifted from the air. We went to sleep, and we didn't mention it again, or to anyone else. I slept at their house quite a lot, but never experienced anything like that again, and never felt worried about being there afterwards. Another reason to hate dolls. So this happens a long time ago. My family and I love going to garage sales and thrift stores. My parents are very friendly and polite, and people like them pretty quick. So they've been offered several times to take stuff for free and even had these type of deals. You can have everything for free, but you have to take all the stuff. So we've ended up with a truck filled with random garage sale items in the process. One time, my mom and I were in her bedroom, checking the loot of one of these type of deals, and we were having a good time while sorting all the stuff. We got to a big trash bag that was filled with dolls. There was a lot of them, so I decided to just open the entire bag and put them all in bed. So we started checking the dolls one by one, choosing what to keep for my sister, what to give away, and what to throw away. Since most of these deals included taking some trash, but we didn't really care, it was fun. We have a half bag sorted out when we get this tumbling doll that supposedly can do flips. My mom likes it. Looks like new and seems like a fun toy for my sister, so she wants to keep it. She asks me to test it and see if the doll, actually tumbles, but the batteries seem to be dead. Tried again, now with the new brand of batteries, but still no luck after a few minutes. So I conclude that the doll just must be broken and that it didn't work. So I take out the batteries and place the same old ones back in and put the doll back on the bed. We keep sorting stuff. 15 minutes passes. My mom and I were taking a break just chatting when suddenly we hear this loud noise that sounded like gears and an overcharged motor. We look at the bed, and the sound comes from the doll, and right in front of both of us, the doll turns its head at me and says, "Mama!" The movement was so abrupt that I even feel the bed shaking a little. My mom and I look at each other and saw her face turning white. I just punched the doll as hard as I could, landed on the other side of the bedroom. We went immediately to the kitchen to calm down and explain what just happened to my dad. After a few minutes, I go back to the room with my dad to investigate, trying to find out what just happened. Then my mom enters a full rage mode, goes for the doll, puts it in a plastic bag, asks my dad to take it to the trash and out of the house. My parents are religious, so after that, they were praying and blessing the entire house for almost an hour. Never seen my mom that scared. It truly felt like a scene from a terror film. I expected the doll to get up and attack me at that moment. I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, even though I've had a couple experiences that really scare me, and up to this day, I have no explanation for it. And this is one of them. Growing up, I always hated dolls, and I was scared of them, even to the point of having really bad, effed up nightmares. Good thing this happens when I was older, around 16, or I'd probably be traumatized. What still bugs me is that even though if I find a rational explanation for why the doll worked again with dead batteries, with the power switched off and by itself. The doll wasn't a baby doll. It was a gymnastic doll that was supposed to do flips. As if it wasn't new and no box. I probably will never know if this is one of those features. And I'm okay not knowing. Something was there in my room that night. So it happened a few years ago, sometime in winter in 2016. I randomly woke up in the middle of the night, and the first thing I noticed was how dark my room was. It was supposed to be dark as I had all the lights off and the windows closed. But a little tiny bit of light from the outside street always finds a way to enter from the edges of the closed windows. Like you can barely distinguish the pitch black from the slight aura, right? But there was none of it. It was pitch black all around. I thought it was probably a power cut, and I started to think random stuff like, probably this is what blind people see. All their life. Must be sad. And slowly drifting back into sleep when I was suddenly reawoken by a feeling of my bed shaking. I thought I'd fallen asleep, and this is one of those sleep jerks that happen when you fall in your dream. But then more stuff started to happen. Soon after the first shake, there was a second one, which I felt much more clearly. A big rat had been invading our kitchen for a while, and I thought maybe it had sneaked into my room. But how can a rat shake my bed? Then, a few seconds later, I felt a literal punch under my bed, as if someone punched the underside of my bed, like right under where I am. I felt my bed bump up right around my back. Oddly enough, instead of freaking out, I became extremely calm for some reason. And oddly enough, again, I started to think of a logical reason. My mom made me check underneath the bed before sleeping, and as she thought some thief might have sneaked into our home, she overthinks. I thought maybe someone actually sneaked in this time, but why will he disturb me instead of, And I felt another 2 consecutive punches from under me as I'm thinking. I froze for a solid minute, finally realizing things might be abnormal here. Maybe I'm bragging, but after freezing initially, I went weirdly calm again, almost as if my brain went, "Oh no, it's a ghost anyway." Then was a final punch, followed by the bed shaking. I remember as the bed was shaking that I got up almost subconsciously, walked straight to the light switch on the other side of the room and turned on the lights. Nothing out of the ordinary. I looked under my bed with the flashlight. Also nothing. I should have freaked out here, but I didn't, which is odd for someone like me who gets nervous and shaky from even the simplest of social situations. My body worked almost like its own here. I turned the lights off, took the flashlight with me to the bed, and fell asleep as soon as I hit the bed. And then it was morning. Nothing ever happened after that. I've experienced several different apparitions over the years, but there's one that I think about often. This story goes back a while. I'm 40 now, and this takes place somewhere between the ages of 17 and 20. It was a summer night, and a few of my friends and I were hanging out along with this girl from across the street from my friend's house, who we used to vacation here with during the summer at her grandfather's house. We were hanging out staring at the stars on this large trampoline, talking about our thoughts of life, the universe, and whatever we were thinking at the moment. The girl, who will remain nameless, and I really start to hit it off. We were flirting, and I ended up holding hands for a while. When it was time to go, I walked her across the road, and we were hanging out in the front yard. Kissing followed, and it started getting a little bit more hot and heavy. She decides that we go inside to her room, but her mom was sleeping, so we had to be quiet. This house is an old bungalow, so it's small and an odd setup. We open the exterior door that enters into the kitchen, and she sneaks across quick to her room at the opposite side of the kitchen. I step in, close the door, and start across. As I'm walking slowly, I look up toward the living room to make sure her mother isn't watching us sneak in. I freeze. She's looking at me from the doorway and says, "Hurry up, what are you doing?" With 6 to 8 feet from me, there's an old sofa chair, and I can see an old man sitting in it with his back to me. I, without taking my eyes off of him, say, "There's a man sitting in the chair." Her response is, "That's not funny, that was my grandfather's chair." I realize he's not moving, and I think he's sleeping, and then it clicks. Was. I slowly look at her and say, "I'm not kidding," and he's sitting right there. I'm now pointing and look back, and he's gone. Now I'm freaking out, but trying to keep my composure and stay quiet. I leap from my spot where I was frozen to the floor right into the doorway where she was standing. We close the door. She's slightly upset and thinks I was messing with her. I assure her that I'm not, but she doesn't believe me, but we eventually start kissing. And again, I try to get back into it, but neither of us can let it go. I keep saying something along the lines of, "I can't believe what I just saw." She's on and off being mad, and I would mess with her like that, and it just keeps saying, rather she keeps saying, "That's not funny." So as you would think, it didn't go much further, and I ended up leaving for the night. We did hang out again, and we did make out a couple of times while we were partying, but it was never the same, and it went nowhere. She would never talk to me about it, and I think she always had it in her head that I could be just messing with her, or maybe it was just freaky that he appeared to me. Apparently he died that winter before, so it was soon after. The next winter, my friend calls me. The house is on fire. They were back home in their state for the winter, and the house burned to the ground the year of him dying with no explanation of what started the fire. Something weird happened when I was a kid, and I can't explain what it was. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I must have been maybe 10, and I was with another 2 friends, one my age and the other one was 4 years older than us. We'll call them Ava and Jenny. We were in Ava's house, and it was a 2-story house in my town. The lower ground was a long garage that could fit several cars, and the first floor was the actual house. To get in the garage, there was a door on the left side of the staircase. She had her play area at the end of the garage, opposite side of the entrance, and about 3 to 4 meters of where her toys were, there was a storage room where Ava's parents would keep winter clothes, costumes, and the like. I was very used to her house, and she would celebrate her birthday in that garage, and I visited often. We must have been playing for a while when we swapped games and opened a dollhouse. I must say that there was no creepy talk at all, just 3 girls playing with the doll family. A bit later, I started feeling something in that storage room that I mentioned. I remember this moment crystal clear, but I'm not sure I can explain what I felt. I've never experienced anything like that again. There was just something not nice in that room, and I just didn't want to be there at all. I didn't see or hear anything, but I had a very strange feeling toward that door. I'm not sure if it was something evil I felt or if it was just a strange feeling, and because I was a kid, I didn't understand exactly what it was. But it was emanating from that room. It felt like the door was going to open wide by itself. The joyful playing stopped, and the 3 of us went a bit quiet until we realized that we were all feeling the same thing. Unprompted and without any prior talk, we shared what we were feeling and started moving in the opposite direction from the storage room. The 3 of us were scared. Ava and I tried to get Jenny to check it out because, of course, she was the oldest, but she completely refused. We ended up rushing up and tidying up the toys so that we wouldn't get in trouble and sprinted toward the door and left to go upstairs. We were pushing each other a bit, and we were the last one left in the garage, but I ended up being the last one myself. The light switch for the garage was on the right-hand side of the door, so Ava went first and opened the door. Then Jenny, and when it was my turn, I slapped the light switch off and we went upstairs in complete darkness. That's just how scared we were, that we didn't even turn on the light of the staircase. Fast forward a couple of hours later when we were in Ava's bedroom, back to playing and feeling went away and we felt safe again. Ava's mom came back from work and went up to check on us. She asked why we left the light on in the garage because she just parked and all of them were on. Now I'm 100% that I turned them off. We crawled through the stairs in complete darkness after all. So how the lights were turned on is a complete mystery. Unfortunately, I haven't kept in contact with Ava or Jenny, so I can't ask if they remember any of these experiences, but from my memories from my childhood, being as vivid as they are, and this particular one has always been there, I've never felt or experienced anything like that ever again, so any input is most welcome. What my father saw made me a believer in the paranormal. My father's a policeman, a no-nonsense guy who lives very much in the here and now and believes only in what he can see and feel or hear himself. At the time of this story, he was in the police force for more than 20 years and I was a teenager. My father worked night shifts and on a regular basis he would come home early in the morning to have breakfast with us before he would go to bed and he would go to school, or we would go to school. He's in the police. He would usually be in a pretty good mood and tell us funny or interesting stories from his day or night at work. At this morning, he was unusually silent, and he didn't eat either. My mom asked if he felt all right. It took a while to actually get an answer, but he said, "I'm not sure what I experienced tonight." He didn't want to say any more in front of us kids, but we prodded him long enough, until he told us the following. It had been quite a night, and he was out with his colleague in a police car. At some point, they were informed over the radio that a car chase was going on not far from them, and their assistance was required. They drove off toward the chase and soon caught up with the suspect's vehicle. The radio had informed them, and 2 men were in front of the car. My father's car pulled up almost beside their car so that he managed to get a good look in the inside. He saw that 2 men in the front were arguing heatedly with each other, and he saw another man in the back. He had no hair and he was so pale that he seemed almost white. He was dressed in all black, and he looked directly at my father, his face almost pressed against the window, with very dark eyes, and he grinned widely. My father was deeply unsettled by this person. He seemed to look directly into my father's eyes, and my father was so sure of this third person that he informed the other police cars about him. The chase ended with the car crashing into a fence and the suspects fleeing into a field. They were apprehended only minutes later. There were 2 men, not 3. My father asked all of his colleagues at the scene if they were sure they hadn't seen another guy. No one else had seen the third man. "I can't explain it," he said to us. "I saw him as clear as day and he grinned at me like death himself." This took place in 2004 and 2005 in Germany. To this day, we have no logical explanation for what he really saw and experienced. Strange woman in my dream. This event happened to me last summer. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm more of a man of science than a man of faith, even though a few strange things have happened to me in my life that I've not really been able to rationally explain. It was the beginning of August and nothing special was happening in my life. I had a period of depression, but it was no strange thing to me. I've had it since I was a child, and it always passed. I have dreams almost every day, and this night was no exception, but this time it was completely different. I had a nightmare in which there was a tall, pale woman with black eyes and black hair. She looked almost human, but there was something inhuman about her. I guess I can't fully describe what it was. It was just my feeling. She looked very nice to me, and her voice sounded sweet as she spoke to me. But even in that dream, I knew that her intentions with me were not good. I don't remember her words. All I know is that the expression on her face gradually changed and she was mad at me. I woke up sweaty and my heart was pounding. I've never had a similar nightmare that would have such an effect on my body. But that wasn't all. My thoughts were hazy, and one thought resonated in my head. Kill yourself and you will be fine. Kill yourself and it will all end. It will be okay again. You don't belong here. I've never thought of hurting myself in my life. I love life and I love people. Like it wasn't even me. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen where I drank a glass of cold water and my thoughts slowly faded from me. I was a little shaken, but I still thought it was just a really bad nightmare, so I went back to bed and fell back asleep again. Nothing more happened that night. I woke up in the morning before my girlfriend, which I thought was pretty weird because she's a morning person in our household, and she looked very tired when she came to the kitchen. I asked her if she was okay, and then she replied that she just had a really strange dream. I told her to tell me the details. In her dream, we were in our bedroom. My girlfriend was awake in the dream, but I was asleep. A strange woman was sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked at her and then pointed at me. She told her, "You have to help me kill him. He's worried here. He doesn't belong here. If you help me, he'll be happy again. You want him happy, don't you?" My girlfriend started arguing with the strange woman. The quarrel led nowhere, and the woman attacked her. My girlfriend fought the strange figure, tugging at her hair and scratching her face. She said that she felt like she was really hurting her because the woman had disappeared with a scream. At that moment, I was staring at my girlfriend in disbelief and asked her one more thing, even though I knew that maybe she knew the answer. I asked her what the woman looked like. Yep, you guessed it right. Tall, black hair, fair skin, big black eyes. She says she'll never forget how she grinned at her. I realized one more thing that morning. My depression was over. I felt as if someone had lifted a heavy stone off my chest and I could breathe freely again. Nothing like this has happened to me since. I'd love to know what those dreams meant. Shadow Man encounter? ? So take it back about 3 years. I had just finished my workout for football, and I'm happy heading home to relax for the rest of that Saturday. My family was out of town for the weekend, so I was home alone. I proceeded to make food and watch TV in the living room, and keep in mind, it's about 1 p.m, when I just get an odd vibe. Not really sure how to explain it, but as if I had a perception to know something was danger. 30 minutes go by and I can't seem to shake the feeling, so I decide that I'll watch Netflix till I fall asleep. I don't remember falling asleep, but I wake up with my eyes closed and proceed to stretch my body from being sore. I sit up on the couch, wipe the crust from my eyes, and look to see if the television was still running, and I notice that it was still light outside, because there was a dark thing in my vision, and I try to readjust, and I finally realize that there's a shadow of a man standing there facing me. My mind feels as if I'm being fried with information, and it's processing whatever it is that I'm seeing, and as I sit there dazed and confused, shadow was in the shape of a man, and it was about 8-9 feet tall. The shadow lowers its hand down to me in a gesture and leaves it out there outstretched. There were no words that were spoke, but in my head I could just feel that the meaning was to take the hand. At this point, I'm beyond scared because I think I'm gonna die. I have no idea what to do or even what to think. So in desperation, I close my eyes and I go into prayer, and I ask God to just let it be quick if this is how I go. Please let it be fast. And about as quick as I was rattling it off in my head, the feeling that I had that was unsettling just went away, and I opened my eyes, and the shadow with this outstretched hand wasn't there anymore. This was pretty long, but I had to get the whole scenario down so I could get some help in what I actually experienced. I know the argument of sleep paralysis is going to be made, and what I have to say is that I stretched and I sat up, and that I wanted to assume that it was sleep paralysis as well. I don't really know how long it was for this all to take place, but it felt like hours, and the presence of the shadow wasn't anything I'd ever experienced in my life. The Thing with Red Eyes. I'm kind of bad at writing, so I apologize in advance. This is also all true, and it might be brutal to narrate. Let's go. So I like to explore abandoned places. Me and my friend were walking through the woods, and we were finding an old mine shaft. It was about 8 p.m. last Saturday, so as we were walking, all the animals would go completely silent randomly, and shortly after, we would find a bunch of flat stones stacked on top of each other, along with branches crackling and rustling in the woods. This happened probably about 4 times, so further in the woods it became completely silent and stayed that way. So during this walk, we're looking around when my friend spots these red eyes in the distance, about group height, whatever that means. We stopped for a bit and just stared at it. We got kind of bored, so we continued on our walk. We soon spotted them again, but this time waist high, so we ignored it and continued on. Once again, we came across the eyes, but this time they were closer and about 5 feet tall, leaned slightly to the left behind a tree. I should mention that we forgot our flashlights and did this whole thing with the lights on our phones. Our light source didn't really go out that far, but we sat there looking at this thing for what felt like an hour. We could see it blink and look around, but it never moved. Occasionally we would get the smell of rotted flesh, and at this point we said, "Fuck the mine, we need to leave." I knew there was an old road not far from where we were headed, so we headed towards that. But we came across what I think was a coyote. Big-ass dog-looking thing. So we debated if we could walk around it, but by the time that we decided and realized it, we had become surrounded. We had 6 of these animals around us in every direction except directly behind us. In that instant, we looked at each other, pulled out our buck knives, thinking we'd rather die fighting. But the coyotes never approached us. They just stood in front of us. So he suggested that we would just walk backwards till they left us alone. As we walked backwards, the coyotes followed us. But if we started to go off left or right, they would kind of jump at us. We made it out safely, but looking back now, it's been almost a week since this happened. I kind of feel like coyotes were guiding us to safety from whatever thing was there with the red eyes. But I'm no quitter. Me and my friend will be going back to those woods again as soon as I get a weekend off. I need to know what those red eyes were, and I really want to explore that mine. That was written perfectly fine. The Hat Man visited me in 2013. This story happened about 8 years ago, and it still pops into my head from time to time, so I thought I'd share it here. If you've experienced anything similar to what I'm about to tell you, please let me know. So, it was around 2013, and little 12-year-old me was laying in bed. It was probably around 10 p.m., I'm assuming that, because that's usually when I went to sleep. I was laying on my side facing a wall, and I heard what sounded fairly close to me like walking. Thought nothing of it because I thought that maybe it was just my sister or something going to go use the bathroom. From what I can remember, the walking was very slow-paced, which I thought was kind of weird. The walking then stopped, but I didn't hear the door open for the bathroom, and I know that I'd have heard it knock because it's just across from my bedroom. After a while of facing the wall, I decided to turn onto my other side, which would have meant that I'd now be facing an open room. When I flipped over, I gasped and froze. I couldn't move at all, and I was holding my breath. I will never forget what I saw. It was a tall man dressed in a long black cloak with a big hat on. The man was very tall, and I know this may sound odd, but he was darker than pitch black. Darkness that swallowed my room. He was standing in the farthest corner in my room, just staring at me. He didn't move whatsoever, and neither did I. I don't know how long I was frozen staring at him, holding my breath for. It could have been a minute, but it felt like forever. I can't describe the terror that came over me when I saw him standing there. I can't even remember what I was thinking at the time. Then I woke up in the morning. I don't even remember falling asleep or exhaling. I just woke up. Now, some of you may be thinking, that was all probably a dream, maybe even sleep paralysis. I would think that too, had it not been for the 2 large footprints in the carpet right where I saw him standing the night before. I did take a picture of the footprints, but sadly the picture's gone. I've looked for it everywhere and I just can't find it, so you'll just have to take my word for it. I told my sister about what I'd experienced the next morning, and she said, "Have you ever heard of the Hat Man?" I said no, and she explained to me who he was. After researching a bit, I found that there are a few people who've also seen this man, and they also say that he doesn't do anything but stare at them. It's been 8 years and I haven't seen him since. Maybe it was all my imagination, but it felt so real. I refused to sleep in that room for years after that because I was afraid I'd see him again. Luckily, I never did, and I hope I never do. Ghostly phone call. I live with 7 people. 4 of us reside upstairs and 4 downstairs. The downstairs entrance is at the back of the house, so I didn't really see much about the inhabitants. This particular night, my parents and sister weren't at home. The people downstairs were home, but everyone was locked up after 8 p.m. I did the same and decided to get an early night's rest. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a loud banging sound coming from the front door. Thinking it was my family finally home, I tried to get up, but there was a heavy, invisible weight on me that prevented me from doing so. Also, my family had a key that they couldn't open the door easily with. And usually, even in my sleep, I hear the front gate opening, but I didn't hear it unlock or even open. Strange. I eventually got up, and it was as if something possessed me to pick up my cell phone. I hurriedly made to the front door, which was not too far from my room. The banging was louder now, and it was closer, and the door was shaking. Then something made me stop. My parents would call my name no matter what when they came home, and they wouldn't be violently banging on a door like that. I quietly went to the room nearest the front door and peeped out of the window. The banging was still occurring, but there was no one at the door. Then, at that moment, my phone rang. I answered, and a man with a gruff voice said, "Open the door." At this point, I was terrified. Obviously, I did not open the door. I texted the number and even tried to call back, but each time I called, there was static on the other side. I don't know how I managed to sleep that night, but when I woke up, I immediately told my family about the incident. They tried dialing the number as well, but again, static. Later that day, I found out that the number was out of service and had been so for the past 20 years. It was definitely one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. Demonic encounter. When I was younger, my parents had gotten divorced. My dad was an abusive alcoholic who drained my mom of a lot of money. So my mom and I left, and at the time my aunt offered to let us stay in her house until we got back on our feet. Now, my aunt lives in a rural part of the country. It's miles of farmland and a few houses every now and then. Her neighborhood is small, but everyone keeps to themselves. The area my aunt lives in is called the base. Apparently, soldiers were housed there and eventually died and were buried in those lands. Don't know the exact history, though. Driving to her place at night is super creepy and confusing. You can easily get lost, so everyone aims to reach home before the sun sets. Now, back to my story. My aunt had a second house not too far, where her family would go and do gardening and just chill sometimes. So my cousins and my aunt there thought that it would be a great idea to spend the night. The house was an old abandoned Baptist church converted to a house that my aunt inherited. The previous owner was a seer woman and would do readings and even exorcisms for people. My aunt took care of her when she was ill, so she gave the house to my aunt. The inside was run down. One couch for about 10 of us. Yep, big family. And a dirty bathroom with an annoying leaky pipe. Light barely entered the house during the day, and also gave an eerie vibe because being in that house or land, it was always dead silent despite being surrounded by nature. That night, we all had these little rooms to sleep in, so being so much as we had to share, my mom and I were in one room, and when I woke up to the sound of a wooden door being creaked open, I turned to see my mother upright, shaking, obviously full of fear. No one came through the door, but you can hear these loud, heavy footsteps around and inside the house. It woke everyone, so we all huddled in the living room. All of a sudden, the lights cut off. We lit some lamps, and my uncle was getting ready to check out the noise outside when a loud banging came at the front door. It was around 1 a.m. and this place is almost deserted. We all stood still and quiet, and then the banging got even more violent. The door began to shake, and a guttural demonic voice was asking to be let in. Panic and terror struck all of us. My younger cousins began to scream and cry because the voice was unnatural, pure evil. The adults sent us into one room, and they formed a prayer circle in the middle of the living room. Everyone's backs were turned to the window, but I was the only one facing it, and I remember very clearly seeing a tall man with horns and a red aura looking back at me from the outside, and he was smiling at me, motioning me to come toward him. He had these long black fingernails that he began scraping the window with. At this point, everyone could hear it, but the time that turned to the window, when they turned to the window, he had vanished. However, all the doors started banging and the windows were rattling. We kids all ran out to the living room and joined the prayer circle reciting the mantras from my religion, and then it suddenly stopped. The sun was now peaking, and it was 6 a.m. Everything felt like an hour, but we couldn't account for the rest of the time that had gone. We stayed for a few months in my aunt's original house without ever visiting that second house. My mom eventually got remarried, so we moved. It's been about 17 years or so since that incident, and we rarely visit my aunt, like once or twice a year. And since then, however, the house has been demolished. My aunt said that strange things occurred whenever she was on that land after that incident, and she felt like she was being watched. She couldn't handle it and eventually sold the land too. Currently, there are no residents on the land. Something tried to make me commit suicide. It's 2016. My aunt had an event and the entire family was headed there. My mom tried to convince me to go since my aunt lived quite a far distance from where we lived, and it made her uneasy knowing I'd be home alone and they wouldn't get back till late. However, I chose to stay home because at the time, I had an A-level exam and I was glad to get alone time to study in peace and quiet. It was about 6 p.m. when my family left. I locked the doors and decided to take a nap before I started studying. I was in the living room on the couch for about 15 minutes when the air suddenly became stuffy. I sat up and looked around, and there was something different. The lights looked dimmer. There was a slightly cloudy look, and the 3 fans, including the ceiling fan that I had on, just stopped working at the same moment, which was kind of strange. Despite the place being really warm all day, I also noticed a huge drop in temperature. As I was about to get up, I started feeling this heavy pressure surrounding me, and eventually it was on top of me. It weighed down on me, and immediately I was engulfed by feelings of sadness and depression. I started to cry uncontrollably and began hearing faint whispers. I closed my eyes during this episode, but when I opened them, I saw I had a razor blade to my wrist. It had only been about 5 minutes. I know I hadn't moved and there were no razor blades lying around. At least any that were easily accessible. I tried pulling the razor away, but it felt as though there was a force going against me, pushing it closer to my wrist. I literally had to struggle to pull it away. As soon as I managed to get it away from me, I felt the pressure of the room increase. I felt a gripping fear and was compelled to run out of the house. I threw on some decent clothes and bolted out of the house. I called my parents to come get me. I locked the door, and I was just waiting outside when the door began to shake violently, as if someone was trying to come out. And it was accompanied by loud banging sounds. I saw my neighbors outside at this point decided to stay in their view until my parents arrived. When they did reach, my mom, who's usually sensitive, felt the sudden drop in temperature and her hairs stood on end. My stepdad, who's a pundit, Hindu equivalent to a pastor, performed a quick fire ritual and smoked the house out. Thankfully, I haven't experienced anything like that since then.